AI is going to be a really powerful agent here because we've
Mm-mm-mm.
got one algorithm that's supposed to fit everybody's sleep patterns. It can't. And so what's going to happen in the next 5 and 10 years is we're going to have
Yeah.
trackers which will feed back using AI and then refine the advice you get based upon essentially real world observations on that individual. So AI is going to be able to extract information to give a much more reliable account of one's sleep. Whether we actually need these devices, I think, is questionable. There does seem to be this human desire that we must be told by something about what's happened rather than going through those criteria I talked about before about whether you're getting good sleep or not. But I do see AI is going to be really important in that domain. And also in some of the drilling down into fundamental mechanisms. A bunch of what we do here in Oxford is look at patterns of gene expression and trying to make sense of how hundreds of genes changing can be correlated to particular sleep
Wow.
patterns and sleep behaviors. That's going to be phenomenally exciting.
So very excited to have Dr. Russell Foster here, all the way from United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining us, Russell. Wow. So let's dive all into about the topic of sleep. We've been wanting to learn a little bit more, help professionals figure out how we sleep better. And you've been working on this for quite some time. Tell me a little bit more. What are some misconceptions we've had for a long time?
It's really fascinating. I think in the 80s, it was a badge of honor to say, oh, I've done another all-nighter. People say, oh,
Oh, we
well done.
remember.
Sleep is this
Absolutely.
indulgence and a luxury, which we can ignore. And of course, because we invaded the night so successfully with cheap electric light, we did so without thinking about throwing away that essential part of our biology, which is our sleep. And I think there's been a change from the 80s. And then by the turn of the century, people were beginning to think the science is telling me this is important. And now we have gone to the other extreme, I think, by a certain group of individuals, where sleep is regarded as this enemy that almost needs to be subdued rather than embraced. We should love it and not worry about it. There is absolutely now a clinical condition called sleep anxiety. I think it hasn't been helped by certain commentators saying you must get 8 hours of sleep. And of course, that's not true. That's an average. It's like shoe size. You wouldn't expect everybody to have the same shoe size. Healthy sleep patterns can range from 6 hours to 10 and a half, even 11. The average is 8. People have come up to me after public talks and said, I don't get 8 hours of sleep. Am I going to die? And I say, yeah, you're going to die, but it may not be due to your sleep duration. And so really the point of writing the book Lifetime was to provide the science and then allow people to make decisions about their particular sleep needs. I think the key question for me
Yeah.
that all of us needs to ask is how much sleep do I need? And how do I know
Yes,
if
I
I'm
want to
getting
know.
the sleep that I need? And this is kind of advice our
Yeah.
grandparents would have given us. Do
Mm.
you feel able to function optimally during the day? Do you oversleep on free days or when you go away on holiday? Are you dependent upon an alarm clock for somebody to wake you up and get you out of bed? Does it take a long time to wake up? Do you feel groggy? Do you need caffeine? Do you need a nap? Do you find you've got changed behaviors? Do you find yourself doing stupid and impulsive things? Do your friends, families, colleagues say your behavior has changed? You're not quite as nice as you were. You're a bit
Oh
irritable. You don't have the
no.
same empathy. And again,
Oh,
you're doing disinhibited, silly things. And if it's yes to those, then there's loads of stuff that we can do about it. And that's the thing. So many people feel that sleep is what you get. No, it's like all of our behaviors. It can be massively modified by what we do.
I want to take a step back and also study about trends. For instance, AI machine learning
Yeah.
has changed so much with just the new technology. I feel like so much is shifting. If there's also new discoveries that you're finding that and realizing that because of how we use now technology or how we're changing also,
Yeah.
these are new things we have to think about sleep that we haven't thought before.
It's an incredibly important area. We touched on
Mm,
misinformation, like you must get 8 hours.
yes.
In the same way,
Yeah.
the mantra out there is you shouldn't look at a Kindle before you go to bed and light before
Oh,
bed. It's
yeah.
really important to understand that those early studies were somewhat misleading. If you look at the study itself, the
Yeah.
big one, it was people looking at a Kindle on its brightest intensity for 4 hours just before
I see.
bedtime on 5 consecutive nights. It delayed
Oh
sleep
man.
onset by just statistically significant 10 minutes. So that's biologically meaningless. Later studies showed that if you were getting sufficient light during the day, any small effects that you were seeing by dim light in the evening were completely abolished. So this is an artifact of some of the way the experiment was done. And it's a shame, really, because these were well-controlled, great experiments, but they weren't done in the field. They weren't done in the real world. Therefore, we've got a misconception about light in the evening. It makes sense to minimize light in the evening, but not ridiculously low. Some of the recommendations, like you mustn't get more than 40 lux 2 hours before you go to bed, that's really low. If you're elderly, the chances of falling or whatever under those dim light conditions are quite serious. We don't fully know what parameters we need to measure to get guidelines. There's some very important stuff there that still needs to be done. The other area where there's misconception is, of course, in devices which report your sleep, tracking devices. Now, it's important to be aware that none of these are endorsed by the sleep federations. None are FDA
I never
approved.
knew this.
They can be profoundly misleading. Now, they're okay for telling you roughly when you went to sleep, if you woke up in the night and when you finally got up. But the algorithms at the moment are not sophisticated enough to tell you whether you've had lots of REM sleep, lots of slow wave sleep. They're very inaccurate. And so people get terribly anxious because their devices said you had poor sleep last night. Actually, they're thinking, hang on, I feel pretty good. And it's extraordinary that we will defer to an inaccurate device rather than the way we actually feel.